What's good, y'all? We back with another video. Today we got the most infamous serial killers in all of human history. We'll get into the video, man. Hopefully you guys like the video, and yeah, bro. Get into the video.
What could be scarier than a house infested with spiders or haunted by ghosts? Well, I'll tell you what. Having a serial killer on the loose in your neighborhood. Some of the most infamous serial killers were not satisfied with just killing. They did some other gruesome, shocking things too. Here is our list of 10 totally insane serial killers. Number 10, Jack the Ripper. One of the earliest recorded infamous serial killers lived in London's East End in the 1800s. While multiple suspects have been named, his true identity remains a mystery up to this day. He is suspected to have killed over 100 suspects, but there are 5 murders he is best known for. Contemporary journalistic accounts refer to him as the Whitechapel murderer.
Nobody found
Travel
him
with me to the 1800s so I can help to recreate a clearer picture of this serial killer. London's East End was a place associated with poverty, squalor, and crime. I imagine that it didn't smell too good either, because, you know, running water and all that. Anyway, Jewish and Russian immigrants moved there to create a better life for themselves, and the place became a bit crowded. Prostitution became commonplace, and there were numerous brothels which provided men with sexual services. Jack the Ripper's victims were all prostitutes, and he began his gruesome killing spree in August of 1888. He did not simply murder his victims, he butchered them. He mutilated his victims so gruesomely that many began to suspect that he possessed a very strong hatred for women. Law enforcement personnel concluded that he must be a surgeon or a butcher because he mutilated his victims with dexterity and skill. Some say that he murdered at least 100 people. Number 9, Jeffrey Dahmer. This American serial killer's taste was a bit different from Jack the Ripper's. He preferred African American men, which he found at malls, bus stops, and gay bars. Between 1978 and 1991, he killed 17 men. So, how exactly did he lure them? He'd strike up an interesting conversation, build up a bit of chemistry, then ask them to come home with him on the promise of receiving money or sex. At home, he'd give them an alcoholic beverage laced with drugs. Then, he'd strangle them. Now I guess an ordinary killer...
Starting your first business is not easy and can be...
Sissy or something?
Killer would try to dispose of the body immediately, but Jeffrey Dahmer is far from ordinary. After he killed his victims, he'd use the corpses for his sexual pleasure, then dismember and dispose of them. Dahmer was a sentimental guy though. He usually kept his victims' skulls, or, get this, their genitals, as souvenirs. I thought a physical memento would have sufficed, but I was wrong. As he gained more experience, he began experimenting with the corpses. Sometimes he'd consume the flesh of his victims. He also attempted lobotomies. He would drill into his victims' skulls before he killed them, and he'd inject them with muriatic acid. He also took pictures of them during the different stages of the murders so that he could look back on his ghastly accomplishments. He was finally caught and arrested on July 22nd, 1991. And in 1994, he was killed by Christopher Scarver, a fellow inmate. Number 8, Harold Shipman. I'm starting to notice a trend here, because while our first 2 guys seemed to think they were surgeons, this one liked injecting his victims. But before I get into that, here's a little about Harold Shipman. He was born in 1946 and was his mother's favorite child. They had a really close relationship, so it's no surprise that he was devastated when she was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer and later died. He became a loner, but he was still determined to succeed. He went to Leeds University and studied medicine, and later got married and had 2 children. So, it seems like he was becoming just your average, successful family guy, right? Wrong. During his career as a medical practitioner, he was trusted by patients. But a local undertaker noticed that his patients were dying at an abnormally high rate. Another unusual observation was that they had similar poses in death. They were fully clothed and sitting upwards or reclining on a seat. It was later discovered that he had possibly killed at least 260 of his patients by injecting them with lethal doses of painkillers. He was arrested in 1998 thanks to the steadfast determination of Angela Woodruff, the daughter of one of his victims. Her mother had been given a morphine overdose 3 hours before her death. Shipman managed to steal her jewelry and an old typewriter which he used to forge her will, leaving most of her estate to him. What a tricky guy. Anyway, in January 2004, he hanged himself in his prison cell, so at least we don't have to worry about him anymore.
He probably was going
John
through
Wayne
stuff 'cause his mom and
Gacy.
something like
They
that.
say that most clowns and comedians are
right
actually sad people in real life, and I suppose that was Gacy's case. Not that I'm making excuses for him. He grew up with an alcoholic father who would sometimes hit him with a razor strap if he did anything wrong. He watched his mother suffer abuse, and he had no friends at school. In his adulthood, he worked several jobs before he became a self-made building contractor. He joined the Jolly Joker Clown Club, and he performed at kids' parties and fundraisers as Pogo or Patches the Clown. He would lure his victims with promises of construction jobs. Then, he'd capture, sexually assault, torture, and strangle them. Throughout the 1970s, he was accused of rape by several teenage boys, but somehow Gacy remained untouched. It was during this period that he was able to get away with most of his crimes. He was eventually captured in 1978 after the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Peist. At first, no one thought that this friendly clown could be guilty of anything too serious, but after a thorough investigation, police found numerous trenches filled with human remains in a space under his house. He finally confessed to killing 30 people, but it is believed that there were more victims. He was imprisoned and given a lethal injection on May 10th, 1994. Damn. Number 6. Charles Manson. In 1934, a 15-year-old girl gave birth to Charles Miles Maddox. The father was allegedly a much older man who was known for being a con artist. Charles got the surname Manson from his stepfather, William Manson, whom his mother married during his childhood. The relationship was toxic. They drank frequently and left Charles in the care of others. The marriage eventually ended, and Charles went to live with an aunt and uncle after his mother was arrested for assault and robbery. He craved his mother's affection and attention, but was met with harsh rejection. This led him to life on the streets and an early introduction.
I ain't gonna lie, bro. Like with all these killers and junk, bro. Like it's really like they go through traumatizing thing when they young. So when they get older, I feel like they keep reliving that traumatizing. I don't know, bro. Like I think that's what.
I found out that he even claimed to have set his school on fire when he was 9 years old. Charles spent quite a bit of time in and out of prisons and reform schools, but his glory days came after he founded his cult, The Family. He managed to acquire at least 100 followers who all shared a mutual love for hallucinogenic drugs and a life of non-conformity. It became a doomsday cult when Charles persuaded his followers that an apocalyptic race war between the black and white population was soon to come. Apparently, the black people would wipe out the white population, and only he and his followers would be safe. After enough indoctrination, he managed to persuade his followers to kill. His members committed a series of 9 murders in the summer of 1969.
Manson and 3 girl members of his so-called family were found guilty of murder in the first degree.
He was originally sentenced to death in 1971, but he carried out a life sentence in California State Prison and died in 2017 at the age of 83. Number 5. H.H. Holmes, nicknamed the Beast of Chicago. H.H. Holmes, or Herman Webster Mudgett, was born in 1861 in New Hampshire. He came from a well-off family and was known for being extremely intelligent. He was interested in medicine and got to pursue his dream at the University of Michigan. This is where the madness began. He started by stealing corpses to make false insurance claims, but it is alleged that he used some of those corpses for experiments. He moved to Chicago and took over a pharmacy after allegedly killing its original owner. Nearby, he had a 3-story building built, except this was no ordinary building. There were several small rooms and trapdoors throughout. There were also chutes which led down to the basement. What he would do with them is enough to terrify any normal human being. In 1893, he advertised his home as a hotel for visitors. This hotel soon became known as the Murder Castle, because many of his guests never made it out alive.
Damn.
Most of his victims were women he seduced, tricked, then
Imagine
killed.
Going there
Sometimes
and then
he'd even get engaged to a woman, then
bro.
she'd mysteriously disappear. He was caught in 1894 after avoiding the authorities for many weeks. He admitted to murdering 27 people, but it has been estimated that he most likely killed up to 200.
In a hotel.
In 1896, he was hanged for the murder of his associate and his family. Number 4.
Ted Bundy. I heard of Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. From the very beginning, Ted Bundy's life was strange and dysfunctional. He grew up believing that his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. This was because his birth as an illegitimate child was humiliating for his mother. As a teenager, he began to exhibit some disturbing behaviors. For example, he'd steal and peer through other people's windows. He studied psychology at university and fell madly in love with a pretty girl from California. Their relationship didn't last, and that seemed to have devastated him. Later, it was noted that many of his victims bore an uncanny resemblance to her. Many sources believe that he began his killing spree in 1974, because this is when many women around the Seattle and Oregon area went missing. He lured his victims by pretending to be injured and asking for help. This kindness often resulted in their demise, as they'd get into his car to offer assistance, only to never be seen again. In 1974, he moved to Utah, and more disappearances were recorded there as well. He was arrested for the kidnapping of Carol.
anybody on the street say they holding out money, they need help, they need to live, bro. I'm not stopping, bro. No, I'm not stopping for you, bro.
The Ranch in 1975, but escaped from prison twice in 1977. After the second escape, he made it to Tallahassee, Florida, where he quickly resumed his murders. He broke into a sorority house at Florida State University, where he attacked 4 women. This resulted in 2 of their deaths. A month later, he kidnapped and killed Kimberly Leach, an adorable 12-year-old girl. He was finally caught and sent to the electric chair in 1989. Crowds gathered outside to celebrate his execution.
Are we back? My shit fucked up. Cut me some slack.
Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born in a village in Ukraine in 1936. In a time of great famine and hardship, he had a rough childhood, especially after his father's conscription into the war. He was a victim of bullying at school and later experienced sexual problems, like the inability to sustain an erection. He became very shy and withdrawn. In his adulthood, he became a telephone engineer after failing the university entrance exam. In 1963, his sister helped him to find a local girl to marry, because she was aware of his sexual issues and lack of confidence. Chikatilo found himself in some trouble as he was repeatedly accused of indecent assault against minors. He had to switch schools several times because of this. It is believed that his first victim was 9-year-old Lina Zakotnova, who he accosted while she was walking home from an ice skating rink. He was able to escape the law that time because his wife provided a strong alibi. After a 3-year hiatus, he murdered 17-year-old Larissa Tkachenko. After that, Chikatilo was on a roll. He'd meet and befriend potential victims and lure them into secluded, usually forested areas. There, he would attack, rape, and mutilate them. In some cases, he ate their sexual organs and removed other parts of their bodies. His early trademark was to slash his victims across their eye sockets and remove their eyeballs. He was eventually arrested for acting suspiciously, but due to ineffective DNA techniques at the time, he was able to again escape the hands of the law. After his release, he worked for a train company, and in 1985, he murdered 2 more women. Later, he began to focus more on young boys. A final arrest was made in 1990, and Chikatilo eventually revealed details about his killings to a psychologist who claimed to have killed 56 people. He was given the death sentence, and on February 14th, 1994, he was shot in the back of his head. Number 2.
By who though? What's up with all these ads, bro? Damn, it's like
Wayne Williams. It all started when an Atlanta woman stumbled upon the most terrifying shock of her life. 2 dead bodies hidden under bushes near a road. They were both children who had been reported missing some time ago. 14-year-old Edward Smith had been shot with a .22 caliber weapon, and 13-year-old Alfred Evans had been asphyxiated. What became known as the Atlanta child murders began in 1979 and lasted for 22 months. The bodies were usually discovered in wooded areas, but some of them were dumped in the Chattahoochee River. Law enforcement officials were dumbfounded, but decided to monitor that area a little more carefully. In May 1981, a group of policemen who were on surveillance at the river heard a loud splash in the wee hours of the morning. The car, which fled the scene, was driven by Wayne Williams, but they had no choice but to let him go because the cause of the splash had not been found. I mean, it could have been anything, right? 2 days later, the body of 27-year-old Nathaniel Carter was found downstream. There was now enough evidence to arrest Williams.
I don't get that, like, you know it was him. Why?
And although he tried his best to prove his innocence, the killing stopped once he was behind bars. It is believed that he has been behind at least 20 more deaths. He is currently serving his life imprisonment term at Telfair State Prison. Number 1. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer operated in Northern California in the late 1960s. He was not only brutal, he was mischievous. After committing murders, he would send letters to the local newspapers. On August 1st, 1969, 3 newspapers received the same letter which read, "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman." He included specific details about the murders that only he could have known, then proceeded to threaten that if his letters were not printed on the first page of the papers, he'd kill more people. He closed each letter with a symbol, a circle with a cross through it. In the aforementioned letter, he added a 3-part cipher which needed to be cracked in order to discover his identity, or so he claimed. The Bay Area police departments and the FBI were completely perplexed. But eventually, a high school teacher and his wife were able to decode the cipher. It read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous of all." He is believed to have committed numerous murders, and in some cases, he called law enforcement himself to report the crime and to claim responsibility. In subsequent letters, he claimed that his murders would guarantee that he had slaves for the afterlife. The Zodiac Killer has bewildered many for a long time, and one of his ciphers was only cracked in 2020. It is confirmed that he has killed 5 people and injured 2, but he claims to have killed 37. The case of the Zodiac Killer remains one of the most famous unsolved murder cases in American history. He has never been found. Now, I know that all of these killers are spooky as hell, but which one freaked you out the most?
Man, like the Zodiac Killer is crazy though, bro. He still haven't been found today? Nah, that's crazy though, I ain't gonna lie. He'll kill him and then send him a message and say he did it. Like who? Hey, yo, bro, he got it, bro. But yeah, man, that was the most famous serial killers of all time. And yeah, bro, hopefully you guys like the video. And yeah, man, until next time, bro.